And could you please explain us how to get internships? And someone has specifically asked that he's doing his third semester in PhD. He's asking how to get an internship, and he also got an admit in Michigan for like to basically apply for the internship and get it.
Yeah. So there are multiple ways to get a good internship in the US or in India. So one thing people miss out is contacting people on LinkedIn and actually talking with them, not just sending them a friend request or something like that, but actually starting a conversation with them about what they are doing in the industry, and making them your mentor and asking them for help to get into different industries. That is very useful to get around the HR blockade that normally is there in different companies. Me personally, I have not been able to get a job or an internship through a proper online job portal application. Getting through the HR barrier is too big of a barrier. Getting directly talking to a technical person is much more useful. They understand your scenario, they understand your background, they understand what quality university you're coming from, and they connect with you much better than a HR person can. So they'll be able to help you much more than just applying on job portals. So try to network with your alumni, especially if you're a PhD. You can join the alumni association and talk with people there who are already in the industry. That might help you get an internship. So networking is very useful in the US to get an internship or a job.
And could you please talk about work permit and visa issues that we are having right now while we apply for internship or jobs in US?
Okay, that's again a really good question. So I was going to talk about this, but I was not sure whether this forum is for that or not. So in terms of the US, for the OPT and CPT, I don't think there have been any changes related to getting these internships for CPT and OPT. But in terms of a H1B visa, there are two barriers that have come up. One is that there are lots of applications that are going into the H1B process, so very few are chosen. I think 1 in 3 is chosen if you apply there. But there are always policy changes happening in there. So if the current administration goes out and another administration comes in, the policies will change again. So it's a very able thing. So in general, what I found out is Europe is more accepting, and except UK, Germany is more accepting towards master students, and the masters there takes a little bit more time, I think, 3.5 years from what I've seen. But you get jobs there too, and you get permanent residency easily and all these things. So staying there is much more easier. But then you'll have to learn a language and all these things. So if you're not up to that, then US would be a good solution.
So, if you compare US and Europe, which one really have tremendous opportunities for MBA as well as for other courses? Because people often confuse whether should I go to Europe or US for studying my master's. So, which one do you really suggest? Because you did your master's in US, so I think you know
Yeah.
what really the difference is.
So there are lots and lots of considerations that go into this, right? The first thing would be your financial situation, whether you're ready to pay the fees in a US university or not. From what I've heard, a German master's would be very cheap to do. Again, you can go to a mediocre US university and get a RA easily. That could be a solution. But you have to decide what are your criteria, your financial situation, whether you want to learn German or not. In general, in terms of Europe, I would just consider Germany for mechanical engineers for CAE. I have not seen people go to France or Italy to do their masters. And what else can we think of? The visa situation is one criteria, I would say, where the process to get a work visa in Germany seems to be straightforward. In the US, it is more tricky nowadays. So you might want to consider that. Again, you want to also consider what you do want to do your masters for. are you coming here to just learn, or do you want to be here in the United States, get a higher salary or something like that? Then Canada might also be a good option, where you can get a PR in 6 months, basically, a permanent residency in 6 months. But then the job market is pretty small, and the jobs available are n- not as high tech, I would say, as the US. There are multiple considerations and weighting factors you need to apply to get an understanding of where you want to go. And obviously, you can obviously stay in India, which is getting better and better in terms of CAE, at least.
And how are job opportunities for Indians in United States after completing their master's?
So for a mechanical engineer, what I've seen is they're concentrated in Detroit mostly, and getting a little bit better in California, but not competitive with computer science degree graduates. So and the cost of living there is insane. So I I would highly recommend, if you're just doing your masters to get a job in the US, I would highly recommend to come to a university which is close to Detroit. Um, like in Detroit would be even better, uh, or in Michigan would be really good. So I personally faced lots of problems because I was outside the major hubs of mechanical engineering. So getting from Purdue to Detroit to find jobs was really difficult, and just being here makes recruiters very comfortable on calling you for different interviews. So there are lots of good universities in Detroit, in Michigan in general. So uh, I would suggest come to Michigan for
Right.
your masters. Obviously, if you are going into the top 10 universities, then it's a different ball game. Like if you're going to Cornell, for example, it doesn't matter uh, where you go. Maybe you might go into nanotechnology or something like that, and you don't care about the automotive industry. Or you might go into Intel or chip manufacturers where you're doing thermal analysis. So it varies on what you want to do. But if you're going to the top 10, it doesn't matter. If you're going to Stanford, you don't care about the automotive industry. And even if you do, people will call you for interviews.
That's helpful. So, if someone has low CGPA in their bachelor's, but they want to do their master's in US, so what would you suggest them to do? Take some courses, project-based courses, or
That
what
would be really useful. I don't know how much the university recruiters look into it, but in terms of getting a job, it would be very very useful, because I have interviewed people, and if a person has just done some basic courses in their bachelor's, it doesn't look good. Just to give you an example, at least during my bachelor's, we had a small project that we have to do where you have to develop a gearbox, for example, which is a very simple task. You just look at ratios, tooth stiffnesses, basic mechanical design stuff, right? And these guys are putting these things on their resumes. Doesn't look good. At least for a Indian like me, I know what goes into these projects, so I know what quality of projects these are. So having a proper different project than your standard bachelor's projects highlights your skills a lot. For getting a job, it would be really, really useful. So,
and what about the course curriculum in India? In bachelor's here, we really don't do much on the practical aspects of the engineering. We just all the time we do theoretical stuff. But after going there, everything is going to be project-based stuff. So, what would you suggest them to do extra apart from their bachelor, so that it would be helpful for them when they pursue their master?
so again, the first thing I would do is do a good programming course. Be it MATLAB is like the standard software used for any university course. So learn MATLAB. That would be useful. That would be one thing. Then like any experience you get on top of your bachelor's work, like just doing theory, is a big plus. Me personally, I didn't do much of projects, and in my time we didn't do much projects. It was 10 years back. We didn't have exposure to this. It would have been really really useful to have a good internship and understand how the industry works, and obviously do better projects. So Skill-Lync would be a good exposure point for you for that.
And have you worked on NVH analysis for heavy machine design? How do you see opportunities of NVH in India now?
So I haven't done NVH on machinery design, but there might be industries where they do that. For example, John Deere or Caterpillar might have some NVH engineers for sure. But I personally haven't done anything related to that. Uh, in terms of NVH engineering in India, from what I see, from my perspective, I have a very limited exposure to different things, right? So my friends work in applied mechanics departments in Cummins, for example. Those guys don't do NVH stuff, but from the level of work that he's doing there, I think NVH work also would be done for that program in Cummins. And similarly, I think there is a Mercedes-Benz development center in India, in Bangalore, I think, which
Yes.
must be doing really good stuff because 10 years back they were doing pretty good stuff. And from the trends I have seen, people are shifting their workflows to India more and more. It's just basic finance, right? You're getting cheaper engineers, the same quality. Why not go to India? That's that's all.
So how has NVH impacted the industry? Can you share with us any instances where NVH made a difference?
Oh, so as I said, there's a example that I gave during my presentation a few weeks back, and that was between a Polo door close noise and a Wagonar door close noise. So if you just close a door of a Polo, you hear a solid thud, right? And then if you close a Wagonar door, it's like a sheet metal slamming on another sheet metal. So the confidence that gives you in the build quality of a car is unmatched. So actually 10 years 7 or 8 years back when we were buying a car, this was a big big USP for a Polo. So it really makes a difference. These small things make a difference. Again, in terms of a vacuum cleaner, I was saying the NVH levels make a big difference. It is not that big a deal in India because people don't use vacuum cleaners, but in the US, it matters. As the economy develops, people are more going towards comfort of things. So it is useful to have better NVH. So
How many people will the NVH sector typically contain?
let me give you 2 points of view here. One is my friend circle here in Detroit. Basically, in say 10 or 15 people, there are at least 5 people who are working in NVH, testing CAE basically. Most of them are in testing, but you can transition between testing and CAE if you have a good background of NVH theory itself. As I said some time back, one OEM would at least have 200 to 300 NVH engineers employed. Not just CAE, again, testing and CAE together. And then each OEM, you multiply it by 3 here, and other OEMs have development centers here too. So at least 5 or 6 OEMs, thousands of people. And then there are consultants which work with these OEMs to help with their analysis. So again, they employ a lot of people too. So it's a pretty decently big field, at least in that.
So if a person graduates with NVH from India, is he considered for job in US? Can he expect any job opportunity? Probably if he's
Mm.
having some experience, some good experience.
No, I have not seen people come here with experience in India. People don't recruit that way. It's not because Indian experience is considered bad or something like that, but the recruiters don't have the knowledge of what it means to have experience in India. So a good example that I can think of this problem is one of my friends who did her masters from Purdue went to Belgium, and she was doing a job search there for about 1.5 years, and she didn't get a job anywhere. She had a good internship in Cummins. She had about 1 or 2 years of experience in Cummins, but still she couldn't get a job in Belgium. So she did a master's in Belgium and then she got a job super easily. So um, getting a hold in the country is very useful to get a job there. Not just the US, but any other country you're talking about. So if you want to come to the US, do a master's or a PhD. Uh, Trying to look for a job from India is really, really tough.
So how important it is to learn CFD? We have experimental techniques as well, but there are so many people asking why is it very important to learn CFD?
So, in general, I'll make the case for CAE in general. Why CAE, right? We have 2 points of view. One is CAE is really cheap in terms of testing. Uh, this might not be apparent to you from a bachelor's point of view, but the testing equipment that is being used by different companies goes into the millions of dollars. So one example that a senior executive from EXA, a CFD software inside Dassault gave us, is that their competition is against wind tunnels basically, right? And then you have like a CFD software. So wind tunnel would cost a company in millions, like tens of millions, and then if you buy a say EXA, you're paying tens of thousands of dollars. So that is like 100 times cheaper than a wind tunnel, and then you can do different DOEs with it, which can't be done inside a wind tunnel, for example. um, and then there are different visualizations that you can have inside a CFD software, which are not visible to you in a wind tunnel. Another example I would give you is for our multi-body dynamics analysis, where if you're testing the durability of a main bearing. When you're doing a test, you can just do a very you can just run an engine at its worst possible cycle for say 100 hours, right, and see how the main bearing turns out to be. But if you do a CAE analysis on it, what you can see is what kind of pressures are applied at different points, how can that pressure be distributed better and have a uniform pattern so the wear is distributed equally around the bearing. All these things can be looked at in a MBD analysis or a CAE analysis, but in testing it is invisible to you. So in general, what so this is from a theoretical point of view. I was talking about that it being cheaper and it giving you more insight into the physics of what is happening behind it, right? But in terms of yeah, insights and finance, obviously, as I said. So yeah, those are two big things that would affect. Oh yeah, there's one more point that I missed. So, in general, companies have obviously realized this, like Ford, GM, Chrysler, Toyota, everybody has realized this, that it is very, very cheap to do CA analysis in comparison to testing. And you can get more insights into the physics happening with the design, right? So, they have realized this, and till 2020, they have like insane targets of reducing testing by 50% and increasing CAE by 80%. So the whole testing of or a validation of the product that they are doing, say for example, Ford has a target of doing 80% of that using CAE and just 20% of it with actual physical testing. So that's how big of an opportunity CAE is for you.
Are there any important pointers that an NVIDIA engineer should keep in mind?
Yes, let me share my screen. Can I share my screen? It's disabled right now.
Yeah, just a second.
So these are the pointers. You always need to worry about what your sources are, what your paths are, and how a human is perceiving it. It might seem very trivial, but when you're actually doing analysis, trying to figure out what is happening with your model, mm, identifying what the sources are, identifying what the paths are, how whether they are interacting correctly with you, with each other, is is very important. This chart might seem trivial to you, but if you keep these things in mind, it would be very useful. So just to give you an example, again, I'll be giving you examples from multi-body dynamics. So here, in terms of modeling, say a crankshaft motion inside an engine, if you're not modeling the main bearings correctly with say springs and dampers, the engage characteristics you see will be very different from reality, right? So if you are not modeling the source of the motion of the crankshaft, then you're not modeling it correctly. So there are different locations. For example, piston liner interaction is one more facet, where are you modeling the oil ring, for example, correctly or not? So this is another source, right? So all these questions that you raise about your modeling are really important.
So, how control systems would help NVH engineers? And if someone wants to know more about learn more about control systems? What are the prerequisites?
Control systems is, I think, I won't say there are any prerequisites. If you have done your first and second years of bachelor's, you should be able to learn controls easily. Um, so yeah. And what else? No, NVH engineers don't need controls. Like see, at least CAE, NVH engineers don't require a controls background. But if you're going into testing, you need to know a little bit about data acquisition systems and DSP and all these things. So that would be useful to know. But depends on whether you're going to CAE or testing.